Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am here with Ari North, the author of Always Human. So, Ari North is a queer cartoonist who believes an entertaining story should also be full of diversity and inclusion. As a writer, an artist, and a musician, she wrote, drew, and composed the music for Always Human, a complete romance sci-fi webcomic about two queer girls navigating maturity and finding happiness. She's currently working on a second webcomic, Aerial Magic, which is about the everyday lives of the witches who work at a broomstick repair shop. She lives in Australia with her husband. You can connect with Ari on Twitter at walking_north, on Instagram at walking_north, and on her Patreon page at www.patreon.com/walkingnorth. So, Ari, first of all, thank you so much for agreeing to do this with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is really exciting. Technology is great, being in different countries. So I want to quickly correct that bio is slightly out of date. That the second webcomic mentioned is on indefinite hiatus. Sorry.
No, good to know.
Sorry to anyone listening.
No, good to know. I'm not gonna lie. I was very excited. I was like, ooh, like broomsticks and repair and witches. That sounds.
Sort of 2 books worth, and they're mostly self-contained, but there was going to be more, but I decided that was the best place to leave it. Like, what's there is still, like, mostly complete, but there could have been more. Yeah, and I'm not currently working on it. Yeah.
Sure. So, tell us a little bit about Always Human, then. What inspired you to write it? How did you come up with the idea? It's such a unique premise, and I'm really, really intrigued as to how that came about for you.
Okay, so about 5 to 6 years ago, so my memory might be slightly shaky, but about 5 to 6 years ago, I wanted to draw a very short, maybe 20-30 pages comic as practice for drawing a longer webcomic one day. And most of the one-shot comics I enjoyed most are romance, so I thought, okay, I'm going to do a romance. I ultimately just default to writing female characters. So I was like, okay, 2 girls, romance. I was thinking about things I didn't want in this story, which was I just didn't want sort of gay angst. Like, that it's important to have those stories, but I didn't want to be writing that. I wanted something very fluffy, very fun. Mm-hmm. And so I knew I needed some different source of conflict because, you need a source of conflict in a short story, and all I really knew is I didn't want this source of conflict to be anything to do with the character sexualities. I was playing around with the idea that one character had a secret. She was secretly a spy. She was secretly a werewolf. She was secretly a something, and that was the conflict. She had to deal with that while sort of trying to navigate her feelings. And then I saw that Webtoon.com was running a science fiction webcomic contest. And I went, oh, a deadline. I will finally do this short comic that I've been procrastinating on, and I will gain my skills, and then I will do a longer webcomic one day once I've learned these skills. So it was very easy to take my idea of sort of one character having a secret and make it science fiction. I thought, oh, she's a robot, or oh, maybe she's like a sort of cyborg and she's got machine parts, and then I really didn't want to draw machine parts. So I went, okay, never mind the sort of circuitry and mechanical bits. It's bio-augmentation. Her secret is that she's biologically, genetically, nanotechnology augmented in some way. And then I thought science fiction fashion, like, the Ugly series by Scott Westerfeld. And I thought it would be really fun if everyone was bio-augmented except for one character, and her secret could be that she's not bio-augmented. And that's sort of playing around with that idea, mostly inspired by things I wanted to draw or things I didn't want to draw, eventually turned into my 2 main characters and the concept of a world where everybody mods themselves to look the way they want, to help remember things, to just sort of go about their day-to-day life constantly. Oh, that's so, I'm going to go on a run today, so I'll just sort of up my endurance for the day and stuff like that. And one character who can't use this technology. And it sort of all developed from there. The original idea was, just 2 girls that get together. And I sort of got to that point as I was planning it out and went, gosh, these two characters have a lot of insecurities that I have not addressed at all. Wouldn't it be nice to continue the story? And by the time I'd finished my contest entry, because this was a contest, I had a very clear idea in mind of how the story would progress through to a sort of a conclusion. And then I placed in the contest, and I got to update this comic weekly on the Webtoon platform until it finished. So that was neat.
Very cool. That's so unique that it started off as a contest and sort of evolved and grew from there. So that's super cool. You mentioned the mods, so obviously being a sci-fi nerd myself, I was immediately taken. I was like, what kind of mods would I want? What would be cool? And there are some mods that are purely physical, whether, people have different colored eyes, different hair. It looked like some people had like kind of fake looking wings coming out of their backs. And there are some mods that are more mental mods, like, automatically remembering things. What mods would you want? If mods were a thing, if that was something you could do, what would you be interested in, I guess?
I mean, firstly, no more periods ever. I'd also like no more pimples ever, though I suspect the no more periods ever mod might also deal with the pimple mod. So that's very practical. That would be my first thing I'd like to try. I'd love to have a prehensile tail. In the setting I set up, that would be very expensive, and it's something I'd have to save for. And I do imagine that there are, government limits on just how non-human you can make yourself, because this is not a new technology, but it's definitely a developing technology, and society's still figuring out how much of it is okay. Like, you never see anybody who's too strongly is really changed themselves, and you don't see super soldiers, but I imagine that technology is being developed, but you don't see it because that's not really the type of story I'm telling. But yeah, a prehensile tail, it would be cool to be able to clamber up stuff and jump really high, cats, but I don't know if that technology would be available to me in this setting. Mm-hmm. I'd love to try just, every eye color. I'd love to try elf ears just for fun. I'd love to try really long hair. My hair's never really gotten past there. It just stops growing at that point. So I'd really love to try long floor length Rapunzel hair just for fun. That's probably what I'd start off considering. Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing hold on a second, I'm having a little bit of difficulty. Give me 1 second. There we go. Whoop, much better. So the other thing that it does sort of make me wonder then, I guess, is there's a group inside the book, the Naturalists, I want to say, and their whole thing is on not modifying yourself, on living naturally. So I take it, given that you're immediately like, nope, no periods, I want a tail, I want to jump like a cat, you would not be in that camp. Where did that idea for them come from?
I mean, it seemed like people would definitely make these choices. And I also wanted to imagine a post-scarcity world so people can afford to make these choices, because the government is going, well, we have to support everyone because there will never be enough jobs for everyone, because that's what happens when automation reaches that point and when technology reaches that point. So part of it was I just wanted to sort of very subtly slide in the idea that people are free to make these choices and people can financially make these choices. But it was also very helpful for Austin and for Sonati's understanding of Austin to see other people who don't use mods, who choose not to use mods, and to then let Austin and Sonati both explore their own feelings about this.
And I think one of the things that you and I talked about a little bit before we started tonight was that and I don't feel like this is a spoiler, so if anyone feels like I'm spoiling, let me know in the live chat and I'll reel it back a little bit. But part of the conflict is Austin's inability to use mods and Sonati's sort of fascination with that. And at several points really, Sonati sort of questions whether or not she should use mods, she should continue to use mods, she should change her look, because she doesn't want to make Austin feel uncomfortable. And something that I think you did a great job of continually hammering home is that whoever you are, you should feel comfortable, with your body, whatever that means. If it means changing it, great. If it means not changing it, also great. that there is no like universal right or wrong answer on what is right for a person. So I love that personally, because I was reading it and I was like, all right, so clearly we're going to get the message that, you know, maybe the mods are kind of bad, or maybe nature's better than technology, and you totally didn't do that. And I thought that was awesome. So where was that something that was intentional on your part in terms of design, or was that something that was sort of happy happenstance? What was that?
Yeah, it's definitely intentional. Like, I'm essentially telling a science fiction makeup story about, you know, whether, and I didn't want this to be a makeup is good or makeup is bad, or plastic surgery is good or plastic surgery is bad, or technology is good or technology is bad. It really frustrates me in science fiction when it's set up as a technology bad, science bad, nature good. Like, nature's great, but we're part of nature and we should be able to use technology in good ways. I don't know where I'm going with that. But yeah, I really didn't want those two opposites. I really wanted to show multiple people with multiple different perspectives on how to use this technology and how they wanted to change their own bodies, existing happily and doing their own thing, and no one coming to the sort of conclusion, this is the sole answer for everyone ever. I definitely wanted everyone to have their own personal way of interacting that made them happy with this technology, and I didn't want there to be a judgment on how everyone else should be doing it. That was definitely intentional.
And I think you did a really great job with that. It definitely
Thank
rang
you
true.
very much.
It definitely rang true for me. So this next question is, mods give people the ability to change their appearance and change their bodies to different genders, and we explore that a little bit with Austin's brother. And what was really kind of wonderful about that is, you definitely touched on how that represents, or how that can represent transgendered people, and also how it can represent transitioning, and how in this future it almost is a non-issue, which is kind of wonderful. But you did it in a way that didn't make it feel like it was a very special episode. It was normal. It wasn't like we all had to go, oh, people change genders. It was just part of it, and that was really great.
Thank you.
Was that important for you to include specifically, and how did that? What was the thought process there?
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would, just jumping back to what mods I would use, I would also definitely try no boobs for a day, just to see what that's like. Back to just since we're talking about Yassel changing gender presentation, yeah, I would also try different gender presentations just for fun. I think that would be really interesting. Okay, so I mentioned that when I was originally thinking, I'm going to do a one-shot practice comic, I didn't want homophobia to be a concern for the characters. I didn't want it to be a queer angst story. I wanted it to be a happy queer story. And that definitely carried through to the science fiction world building. Like, I definitely wanted the future is gay to permeate the whole story. I really wanted to show that this is an accepting future. So, and I try to do this in many ways. So you'll notice there were very few labels in this story, because ultimately I feel like labels serve a purpose now that might not be needed in a more accepting world.
Sure.
And I also, tried to subtly show different characters presenting gender in different ways, being attracted to whoever they want, or, whoever. That's the wrong way of putting it. But, I was trying to show the future is queer and inclusive in as many ways as possible. That was actually one of Austin's friends had an arc that got cut out because it felt like a special episode, and I didn't want that. I wanted it to feel natural. And I guess I've read enough stories where it feels like people like me are the special episode, that I was trying very hard not to special episode anyone, and that meant, I guess, reading a lot of other people's reactions to being special episodes and trying to absorb that, even if it's not part of my own experiences. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to find the words to describe why I felt that the arc with Austin's friend, who is trans, got cut because it felt forced, but Yassel didn't feel forced, and I can't I don't know why one felt forced and the other didn't, but it's something I was thinking about, but I can't really figure out how I was thinking about it. Sorry, that's all I've got.
No, that's fine. And like I said, it was such a well done job, like, of making it just feel normal, of making it just, yep, that's part of the world, and no one cares. Whatever. You put on a blue shirt today, that's cool. That's
what I wanted. Yeah.
So you managed to take something. I mean, obviously the sci-fi elements are not terribly heavy. We never really go into the technology of how the mods work. We don't really worry about, how many mods can a body take, and does it physically change something? Is it a light represent? What is that? We never get it there. But you did manage to take something that was pretty sci-fi-y and mix it with a relationship story really well, and leave, me at least, and I'm sure other people, rooting for these characters and really excited and happy at their relationship. So how did you balance that? How did you balance creating such a different world with such a universal story?
Probably what I love most about science fiction is the exploration of ordinary life in a different location, with technology on another planet. Like, I love Becky Chambers' books. I love the Murderbot books, which are obviously epic to an extent, but they're mostly... The appeal to me is, like, ordinary life.
Yeah.
And, like, how these characters, learn and live and what they do. And that for me, has always been the joy of science fiction. There's also a lot of anime and manga influence you can see in Always Human, and I feel like it's more common in anime and manga and probably prose novels from Japan, though I can't say I've read that many, to have slice of life stories in speculative fiction settings. It's not something you see very often, I feel, in Western media. There's a sense, if it's fantasy, there has to be a bad guy that you defeat. If it's science fiction, there has to be a bad guy that you defeat, or a natural disaster you ward off, or something. And that's far less common in anime and manga. I can think of like Aria is a series about Mars, and just about the everyday life of gondoliers living on a future terraform Mars, and it's really delightful. And so I've definitely seen stories like this before, and I just didn't feel up to telling an epic story in a webcomic setting where I was sort of figuring things out as I go on a weekly basis to an extent. Like, I had character arcs, but I didn't feel like I could have a plot that I sort of filled in the details of.
Sure.
So I went just character arcs only, and so then it just became a matter of how do these characters live, what do they do. I did take care not to let the setting be like too different to what we're used to now. So there's a vague mention of you can only use this many mods a month or something because of government regulations.
Sure. And
that was partially a way of not letting the story feel too unfamiliar. I mean, visually, the cities are just sort of white and clean, and it's a sort of an aesthetic that's easy to draw, but it's also an aesthetic most people are familiar with. Like, there's still universities, it's only a couple of centuries in the future, because I didn't want to get too far away that people wouldn't be able to relate. Like any world-building choice, I thought, firstly, the technology, what does the technology say? And then secondly, what will feel familiar and livable into a reader?
Mm-hmm.
So, does that answer the question? I feel like I got off topic and then I tried to get back on topic, and if I didn't answer, feel free to repeat the question.
No, that answers it, and also sort of teased me up really, really well for a question that we got via email. So this question is from Tora. Rather than say people's names, I'll go with their email addresses here. And Tora wants to know, hopes aside, do you believe that humanity is heading towards a more utopian future with the acceleration of technology, or a more dystopian future? And that sort of ties in with what we were talking about, so that works, actually.
Oof, That's a question.
I know.
I keep on coming back to hope, but in general, when you look at the past, we've gotten more utopian. I genuinely feel like overall we've improved our living standards. We are better about being kinder to like other countries, you know, like 2,000 years ago, let's just make war to get their resources. Like as a whole, that sometimes probably still happens, but it also doesn't happen. I'm coming back to hope, but I want to hope that will continue. I know there's a lot of really awful stuff happening right now, but there's been a lot of awful stuff even worse in the past, and I want to hope that we're just sort of in a little bump of awfulness. Back to hope. I do think that the pattern of things slowly getting better will continue, and I do think that we will make the right choices, we being, you know, humanity as a whole, over the next 100 years, over the next few millennia. It will progress as it has progressed over the past few millennia, and will eventually get better and better and better. I mean, it's a bit of hope, but I do think that it's a pattern of slowly getting better, sometimes back steps, but slowly getting there, and I have to believe that the pattern will continue.
I think so too. You know, obviously this question wasn't directed at me, but I think you really hit the nail on the head. If you look at the timeline of humanity, there are definitely times where it goes a little backwards, but by and large, it is a progression. And I think that it is tied to technology. As we become more interconnected and we realize the things that, you know, unite us are far more than the things that divide us, it becomes much harder to hate the other when you understand the other. It's a great example. Right now, I am in Pennsylvania, and you're in Australia, and we're having a conversation as if you were sitting right across from me. You couldn't have done that 20 years ago.
Yeah. And I have to believe that helps. And I really think that we can do good things with technology, and that utopia is possible one day. I have to believe that. It's a weird year.
Well,
it's an awful year.
It's been it's not been a great year. I will be honest. The running joke is that there's talk about a meteor that might be passing near the Earth in November, and it's sort of like, well, on the one hand, that would be terrible, but on the other hand, I don't know, meteor, be quick, I guess. It's a rough year, but jokes aside, hope is honestly is the most important thing, and you have to hope that the world gets better, because, you know, otherwise, what's the point? But now that we've talked about humanity's ultimate, you know, fate, just light, friendly stuff, let's talk a little bit about the process of going from a webcomic into a published book, and what that journey was like for you a little bit.
Okay. So I wrapped up Always Human a few years ago, and didn't think I'd ever print it because it was done in mobile scrolling format. So one panel at a time on a screen, and you just scroll down throughout the chapter. I also managed to lose some of the high resolution files, which was disappointing. So I didn't think printing was ever possible, and I'd had a lot of people ask if I would self-publish, and it just seemed like too much work and too much redrawing, and not something I do. Rachel, who works at Little Bee Books, stumbled upon the webcomic at some point, read it, liked it, reached out, said, "Hi, I like this." I said, "Ooh, thank you very much, that's nice. I like it when people like Always Human." And then at some point pitched Always Human to the editorial team, the publishing, I don't know how publishing works, pitched it to Little Bee Books, and came back to me with an official offer. So I was very lucky in that sense. I know that publishing is, you know, really tricky, and there's lots of querying, and I was lucky enough that I didn't go through that. I suppose when you have a complete story out there to read, you're open to these sorts of opportunities that, you know, I know this isn't how it works for most people, and I know I've been very lucky. So I explained to her, I lost some of the high resolution files. Is this a problem? I'm not sure about the reorganizing all the panels into print format. And she was very confident that it was doable. I signed on with an agent to organize a contract, and we got to it. Luckily, in the years since I wrapped up Always Human, technology has gotten better and image upscaling has gotten better, and so I didn't have to do much redrawing of the chapters I'd lost the high resolution files for. The computer could just upscale it for me without losing quality, so that was fantastic. So I separated out the speech bubbles from the art, sent the files off to Little Bee Books. Rachel and a guy called Rob both worked together. Then I think it was only the two of them, at least I've only talked to the two of them, worked together to organize the panels into an initial first draft of a book. And they sent it to me, and I was like, whoa, I really didn't think this was possible, and that they did a really good job. And then I came back with feedback. What if we organize this here? What if I redraw this? What if I add a whole new panel? What if we do this? And then we spent a lot of time going back and forth to just make it work well on a print page, which it hadn't been designed for, but we wanted it to feel as if it had been written that way. And Rachel and Rob are both amazing and work really hard, and I definitely couldn't have done this without them, let alone all the other things with printing, how to get it in, I don't know, bleed and all that. I don't know anything about that. So they're amazing. The publishing company is amazing. Little Bee Books is great. And I guess that's, we sent off the final files. They got printed. It's in bookstores. That's super exciting.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't think I left anything out. Yeah.
So,
that's it.
So on the one hand, you were a debut author, but you already have a following. There were already people who knew the webcomic, who knew your works, who were asking, hey, when are you going to publish it? When are you going to publish it? What was that like? What was it like to be sort of debut, but not quite, you know?
I've had this sort of, I'm putting a story out into the world and people are reading it for the first time ever experienced 5-6 years ago, and that was terrifying. This was a lot less terrifying, so it was nice to get that out of my system. I can't imagine, it feels like a really big commitment printing a story versus putting it online. It's like any mistakes are there forever, anything weird is there forever. That's very stressful. I don't know how people have that stress at the same time of having the stress of sharing a story for the first time publicly. There's two separate stresses in my head, and I got to go through them separately, and that was good. That was nice and relaxing. Well, not relaxing, but it, less stressful than it could have been. Back to 2020 was a weird year. There were so many awful things happening this year that I don't even know what a normal debut experience would be like. People can't go to bookstores in so many places. Well, what's it like? I don't even know what it would be. If 2020 had panned out differently, I don't know. I feel like perhaps that's even the bigger difference than me having done a webcomic first.
Sure.
2020 must have been so different for so many debut authors, and at least I knew that people liked the webcomic, and so that was also again it wasn't, this is the first time anyone's seeing it and nobody's going to read it because the world's going to hell. At least the webcomic was out there and people could read it, and hopefully they also want to read the book and stick it on their shelves, and some people have, so that's nice. Yeah. I don't know, sorry, don't quite know how to respond to that.
No, it's a good answer, and at this point I really think that the publishing houses all have to get together, and I don't know, maybe give a pin to every debut author from 2020. I survived my debut novel in 2020. Just some commemorative plaque maybe, or it's a little sticker we put on all the books. This book came out in 2020. Just there's something,
Be kind to it.
Yeah, exactly. Please be understanding. This book came out during a difficult time. But I've got a question here in the live chat from Taryn DFW, and the question is: with so many people working from home, do you have any routines or methods to keep producing content that might help some folks that are decoupled from an office for the first time?
Having a separate workspace to your living space is very helpful. For me at least, having some sort of timetable and structure and routine is very helpful. There's a mobile phone app called Habitica. Let me just check what it's called, so I'm not telling you the wrong thing. Habitica. That is great. It sort of helps you build up good habits and rewards you as if you're playing a game, and that rewards me very well. That definitely helps me develop a structure. I use a program called Rescue Time, which will track what I've been doing on the computer all day, and so I can judge myself if I have not been doing what I planned on doing. Just setting a alarm, and every hour I get up and stretch sort of gives me a sense of time passing and is also getting me to get up and stretch. So that's good. That's probably all I can think of right now. But I hope that helps. It's, a weird year.
It absolutely is. And I think that's great advice, just taking some time and creating a separate space so that way work doesn't permeate everything. You kind of have it in its box. That box is just now in your house. So, switching gears up again a little bit, I wanted to go back and talk a little bit more about sort of the relationship between Austin and Tsunade. So, you wrote their relationship in such a way that was so relatable for me, and I'm not a woman. I'm not in a relationship with another woman. So in many ways you would think, I don't have these touchstones, but you made it so universal and so accessible to everyone. How did you do that, and what was sort of was that the intent, I guess?
There are a couple of things I can say in response to this. I guess falling in love is very universal, but this might upset some people, but a lot of heterosexual couples fall into certain tropes. Fictional couples fall into certain tropes. They're tropes we recognize that are very specifically gendered. I didn't sit down and go, I'm going to write a story about two women that can be accessible to anyone, but by writing a story about two women, I don't have that background of gendered tropes to draw upon, and to an extent, I think that makes it easier for anyone to relate, because they're not going, well, this is a boy who's doing a boy thing because he's a boy, and this is a girl who's doing a girl thing because she's a girl. When I struggle to relate to a fictional couple, it's often because the man's doing an alpha male thing, or the woman's doing a woman thing, and that doesn't resonate with me. So I think by not having a man and a woman, I left all those specific tropes that I don't find relatable behind, and I guess I'm not the only one who maybe doesn't find them relatable. Or I guess by writing what I find, I was writing them as people. I mean, ideally everyone should be written as people first, but I do feel like there are gendered tropes that I sidestepped by having two characters who are the same gender. Also, ultimately, the romance for me isn't necessarily the most important part of the story. For me, the most important part of the story is the characters having insecurities and working through those insecurities. And I want the romance to be part of that. I want them to mutually inspire each other. But I think the opening scene of Always Human sets the story up quite nicely, and the insecurities up quite nicely. So I'll just talk through that. Like, Tsunade, the main character, begins the story narrating that she's been crushing on this stranger and hasn't worked up the courage to talk to her. And she's been doing this for months. And we see the first time she works up the courage to talk to this stranger, and it's because she goes, oh, I can be helpful. Mm-hmm. So Sonati's insecurity is that she struggles to sort of, with her confidence, unless she feels like she can be helpful. She feels like she's being helpful, she can do it. Mm-hmm. And you know, being too helpful, well, what's left for you? And that immediately sets up an arc that we get part of in this book, and then there's a second half of the webcomic where it progresses. Austen bursts into tears at a stranger because she's stressed, and so it takes a bit longer to get into her insecurities because we're not inside her head the way we're inside Sonati's head at the beginning of the story. But again, she's got a bunch of anxiety, she's got a bunch of insecurities that she's working her way throughout the story. And they're both doing this with each other to an extent because there's a romance, but they're also doing this with friends, and they're also doing this by themselves. And to me, that's the heart of the story, the character arcs, not actually the romance, not actually the setting. To me, character arcs are the heart of every story ever. Like, for me, and what I enjoy, a story with a good character arc is what gets me invested, and it's how I write. It might be a romance, and the romance is important, but the character arcs are the most important thing to me, and I wonder if maybe that made it relatable, that, I don't know, the character arc resonated with you in some way, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
I think that they definitely came off as very real people. And, you know, as someone who consumes a lot of media, it didn't feel like you were hitting on any of those traditional romance story tropes where there's a misunderstanding because he's a bad communicator because reasons, and she's sensitive because we didn't do that.
I mean, Sonati is a bad communicator because reasons, but hopefully we were in her head enough that it didn't feel because reasons.
But it felt earned. Like, it felt like her core communication was very clearly explained as to why this is happening, as opposed to sometimes with romantic movies or TV shows or subplots in TV shows, you just go, why is this person bad at communicating? Because it would be bad for the plot if they could talk through their problems.
Yeah, I tried very hard to make all the conflict in the story a result of who we know the characters to be. I tried really hard to get the characters into the page or into the screen because it was originally a webcomic, and hope that the readers would be so deep in their heads that when they do make mistakes, it actually feels like the right thing for the character to do because you're in their head, and that's what they do. Of course, that's what they do. Yeah.
See, you know, and I think you captured that. The part with Sonati and her birthday and that whole debacle that is a thing at first, and they resolve it. It felt very earned. It wasn't like, where is this coming from? It was clearly talked about. It was clearly laid out, and you could see the train wreck kind of coming. You're going, oh, yeah, no, I see. You see what's about to happen here. Okay. But it didn't feel like you were like, oh, well, we have certain plot points we had to hit, so now we're coming to the inevitable, oh, there's a conflict, and how will their relationship go? It was very clearly like, it felt real, I guess.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, I've got another question. This one from our live chat is from Spectrum Reading, and they want to know, are there any webcomics that you've enjoyed?
So many webcomics that I've enjoyed. Okay, let's start with webcomics on the Webtoon platform, and then I'll talk about others that aren't on the Webtoon platform.
Cool. And for people who may not be aware, can you explain what the Webtoon platform is?
So webtoons.com, they pay a really large number of webcomic creators to provide weekly updating webcomics. These are designed to be read on the phone, so you sort of scroll down and read. And they've got a lot of completed webcomics that are fully wrapped up. They've got a lot of ongoing weekly updating webcomics, and everyone who is a featured creator on the platform gets paid. They're like a great company. And it's free to read the weekly updating webcomics, so they're very good. On the web, should I stick to mostly recommending sort of family-friendly comics? Because, is that a thing I should be doing?
So, good question. We've never really explored with that before, so let's do this. If there is... you know what? I think it's okay. I'll be honest, maybe I'm going to get in trouble later, but I think it's okay. If there's something that you think is great, talk about it.
Okay.
And maybe we don't, get super explicit, but if there's a thing, talk about it. You know what I mean?
Okay. I'll start with a family-friendly one just to ease people into it. Cursed Princess Club is a great story about an ugly princess. She's, green-skinned. She's got, very, very odd-looking eyes. She looks, a lot like a goblin. And she's got a family who loves her and adores her, and she's never thought of herself as ugly until she starts interacting with people outside her family. Mm-hmm. And now she has to deal with all these insecurities, and it's just a very cute, heartwarming story about family and friendship and loving yourself, and with a backdrop of, fairy tale jokes. And it's great. I love it. It's so warm. It just makes me feel really good. I love Law Olympus, which is actually going to be a Netflix animated TV show as well, by the Jim Henson Company, which is really exciting. This is a bit more of an adult story. It's a retelling of the Hades and Persephone myth, but with a sort of very modern slant, and there's drama, and there's friendship, there's romance, there's dealing with sexual harassment, there's dealing with sexism. It's in many ways a very serious, thoughtful story, but it's also really exciting and romantic, and the art is stunning. And I ship it. It's great. I love Mage and Demon Queen, which is again more of an adult-ish comic in which there are lots of boobs everywhere. But it takes the sort of premise of a video game where you have to defeat the demon, sure, king or queen in this case, except one of the mages at the academy where they are training to fight the demons has a crush on the demon queen, and it's just this really wacky rom-com, very funny, very cute, surprisingly nuanced. As the story progresses, you think, oh, this is just a joke. It's hilarious, and then actually it's the characters have a lot of depth. It's fantastic. I'm super invested. I really could go on for the next hour. I love Muted, which is a urban fantasy story about witches in New Orleans. The main character is dealing with having magic she possibly shouldn't have, and there's all sorts of family drama and murderous demons and secrets, and but also these really good, heartwarming moments as the characters sort of learn to love themselves and take care of each other and are there for each other, and overcoming abuse. And it can get very dark, but as it works through the really dark moments, there's a lot of messed up family history, but as they work through it, it's just so uplifting. I love it. Like I said, I really could go on for a very long time. I love and adore The Doctors Are Out, mm-hmm, which is a cute gay rom-com with a very fun pun, The Doctors Are Out, about a doctor who has a vet move next to him, and they get off on the wrong foot, and there's lots of bickering, but they're sort of slowly getting to know each other, and we're uncovering the scars of their past, and it's hilarious. The characters are great, the art is great. I ship it. It's really good. I love Strawberry Seafoam, which is roughly Sailor Moon Mermaid.
Looks like we might have lost you there for 1 second.
It's just so gorgeous to look at, and it's actually really close to the end.
1 second. We got Sailor Moon, but with mermaid, and I'm assuming it was maids, but...
Yeah. But there are also mermen, and magical. There is one magical boy merman. But yeah, it's actually very close to the end. It feels like very soon they're going to defeat the final big bad and everything will be good under the ocean again. And it's a really delightful story. That was Strawberry Seafoam. I also love Seed, which is a sort of thriller about a teenage girl who's talking to a chatbot that is actually a genuinely sapient and very dangerous AI who has escaped from the lab where they were developing it. Mm-hmm. And that's very, very interesting. Very, very tense, lots of factions, lots of food for thought. I'm enjoying Crumbs, which is just about wrapped up, which is just very soft, very sweet. I feel like anybody who likes Always Human would really enjoy it because it's the same sort of romance in a different setting, in a speculative fiction setting, with characters who are complicated and working through their issues and sort of learning to love themselves and to do what they want to do and figuring out their place in the world at the same time as they're navigating this romance. So that's probably a very good webcomic for anybody who liked Always Human to read. Circuits and Veins is another great webcomic that people who like Always Human would enjoy. It's an android human romance. It's also a soft sapphic science fiction story, very character driven, exploring what life might be like in a future where androids have developed genuine intelligence and what the laws are like, how they might be treated, just slowly following this very soft, gentle romance as an introduction to this world. I might recommend a few off the Webtoon platform, and then maybe I should stop talking about this. I really could go on for a long time, but Gunner Crib Court is about a girl in sort of a creepy science fantasy school, and there's law and there's history and there's amazing art, and just every chapter sort of introduces something new. It's absolutely fascinating. I love Namesake, which is a fairy tale pastiche that's just genuinely completely epic, about people who sort of go into fairy tales and classic stories like Alice in Wonderland and have to live out the stories and the whole lore behind this, and it's building up to something really just amazing. I so much going on, so much plot. I mentioned before that I'm scared of doing anything plot driven as a webcomic because it's a serialized story, but this one does it so well. Namesake is fantastic. I love Sleepless Domain, which is another magical girl story, this time about a city where every night monsters arrive and magical girls are the only people who can fight back the monsters, and we're slowly learning the lore and getting to know the characters, and it's just really, really intriguing, and the characters are great. And should I keep on going?
I think we've got we've got a couple of people who all seem really interested in Sailor Moon and mermaids. I think that's the takeaway.
I think Strawberry Seafoam. It's really, really good, and it's nearly wrapped up. So this is an excellent time to read it because you're just in time for the climactic final battle.
So we'll be able to binge it, and then we'll get the ending. That is kind of the perfect moment, isn't it?
Also, Castle Swimmer, if you like, this is back on Webtoons. Castle Swimmer, if you like mermaids, it sort of feels like it has an Avatar: The Last Airbender vibe, but underwater, and like it's not for plot reasons, but just this sense of the characters and the nuance and the sense of exploration. That's probably the best comparison I can give. That's very good to Castle Swimmer for anyone who likes mermaids.
Very cool. So we're about 50 minutes in, and usually I try not to keep people too long with me. Otherwise, we end up here for 5 hours, and I think our record actually is 2 hours, and I felt very bad about that one-ish. So let me sort of close/ask this last question, I guess. We've alluded to the fact that 2020 has been a really rough year. It's been a very tense year, a very confusing year, and you wrote something that I think is very calm and very sweet and very gentle. and very nice and wonderful in that regard. Was that the intention? Was the intention to have this gentle story that wasn't going to necessarily give me whiplash as, we go from heartbreak to horrible thing to horrible damage to maybe some redemption to, it hurts again. And if so, or if not, if the goal was to write something that was this, genuinely good and kind feeling, do you think that that's something that is needed more in fiction today? I know there's been lately a trend to go kind of grimdark. Everything is realistic and gritty, and we want to... And I'm curious if that's something you think is going to continue now that the world is a little more grimdark, I guess.
So when I wrote Always Human, there had been Korra and Asami in Legend of Korra, and there'd been Ruby and Sapphire in Steven Universe, and we were seeing queer characters get their happy endings, but often hinted at with Legend of Korra. And there had also been the 100 and the whole bury your gays thing, and a lot of stories with gay angst. And I mentioned that I very specifically didn't want to do that, and that definitely became a part of the whole story. I very specifically wanted this to be a happy time story. I wanted it to be calm and peaceful. I don't know if I could have written Always Human in 2020. This has been such a rough year and just highlighted so much racism and so much awfulness. I don't know if I could have written Always Human now, but 6 years ago, I was feeling optimistic enough that I could write it. It was intentionally a soothing story. I wanted conflicts to be earned, and I wanted readers to be able to go into it knowing that they definitely get a happy ending. I feel like that's especially important for queer stories, because even now often they don't end happily, and I wanted that confidence but especially 5-6 years ago, I got so many asks going, they're going to have a happy ending, and I had to keep on being reassuring, yes, they will, because that was so rare. So I definitely wanted that. I do think, in general, that's something I'd like to see more of. There's definitely a tendency for dark and gritty that feels unnecessary a lot of times. Dark stories can be very powerful, but happy stories can be very powerful too, and hopeful stories are great, and I would love to see more of them. I don't think we get as many as would be nice. And especially in 2020, I think we could do with more hopeful stories. But in general, even if 2020 had been like 2019, it would be nice to see more optimism in our fiction, especially in our science fiction. I mentioned before that it's always science is the enemy, and this scientist did a wrong thing, and now we're facing a disaster. And it would be nice to see some optimism about that too. Some thoughtful optimism, not I don't want propaganda, but it would be nice to see genuine explorations of what science can do. And yes, we have to be responsible about it, but yes, we can be optimistic and we can do good things. I'd love to see more of that.
So how I just said.
Not off topic.
I was going to say, how I just said we'll wrap it up and we'll come up. Yeah. You asked a question, or you posed a question that I went, ooh, that's an interesting one. So we're going to ask that one next. I'm sorry. But why do you think it is then that with science fiction there's such a fear around science? Science is the enemy. The scientist has created some horrible thing, and now we have to deal with where does that come from, do you think? Because it does come up a lot.
I'm sure somebody's done a PhD on this, investigating how nuclear war fears or something, and how that's influenced fiction. I just don't know, but I'm sure somebody's written this PhD, right? Mm-hmm. Part of it might also just be a lack of understanding. Part of it might be a bit of anti-intellectualism. The smart people in their ivory towers can't possibly get it, and scientists can only be smart people in ivory towers. I don't know. I don't know. It could be that, like, you see a lot of movies about creative people getting to be creative, which could be a comment on creative people creating those movies. Mm-hmm. Maybe especially when it comes to movies, because it really is movies where you see that, oh no, science is bad. Like, science fiction novels are often much more optimistic about science. And I think it might just be because ultimately the people making movies maybe aren't really passionate about science. They're just excited to tell a story with a really scary villain. And hey, nuclear bombs are out there. Science has led to technology that has created, I mean, there have been disasters, there have been bad things. Science can lead to very terrifying possibilities. And I guess maybe the people who write movies just want a great villain, and a villain that could be real, a villain that we could create ourselves. That's a horrifying villain. So it would be cool to see more science fiction, I guess, in movies and TV, especially with people who are sort of passionate about science. Like, a lot of great science fiction authors have science degrees, are also coders or physicists or mathematicians, etc. And I feel like that shows, that permeates their story, their love of what we could do completely permeates science fiction when it's written that way. And I guess maybe I'm being mean when I say science is always a bad guy, because that's not true. It's only in the really popular stories that make it big I feel that science is always a bad guy. And there has, of course, been a lot of, historically, like, Star Trek and Stargate, there has actually been. So maybe maybe that was a bad statement for me.
I don't really think that it was a bad statement, because I definitely think, everything kind of moves on a continuum. But I do think there's definitely been a trend, at least lately, of sort of more dark, just in general, but with science fiction in particular, just a lot of dark storytelling where the science is kind of horrible and kind of grim, and, rather than a glittering new age, it somehow gets, twisted and becomes worse. A lot of it is the megacorp fiction that we see a lot more now. But you know what? That's why I like your book so much, because it was science done in such a positive and happy way. I was reading it and going, I would totally live in this world. Mods sound really cool. That sounds awesome. And even the people who don't have mods, I mean, they're living a life as well. And all of this is so nice. I was like waiting for, where are the anti-mod terrorists? When is that plot line going to rear its head?
Not in this story. Maybe in another one, but not in this story. This is definitely a wish fulfillment future here.
I hope that it's closer to reality than some of the other things that are out there right now. But time for, if everyone's okay, just our shameless little plug. So you can get Always Human at Town Book Center, which is located in Collegeville, Pennsylvania. We are a locally owned independent bookstore. You can also pick it up online at our website, which is townbc.com. That's T-O-W, N as in Nike, E as in Echo, B as in Bravo, C as in Charlie.com. And Ari, once again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me. This was so much fun. I really had a great time.
Thank you very much. I was really delighted when I was asked. I really enjoyed this. This was great. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. And to everyone at home watching, thanks so much for tuning in with us. We're going to be back again tomorrow night. Check your emails. We've got a young adult author panel that we'll be doing. I'm really looking forward to that one as well. It's going to be, this will be our busiest week in terms of events. So that's really exciting. We're growing, and thanks so much for continuing to watch and support us. Have a great rest of your night, everyone. Take care.